Newly released Bodycam footage has turned the entire Kyren Lacy case upside down.
You were running in the back of me.
So, but the charger was coming right at you,
right,
correct?
Right.
And that's why you had to slam when you break the head on with you. So yeah, just make sure you include that, and that's very important.
For months, the former LSU star was branded reckless, even accused of causing a man's death. But shocking video evidence proves he was innocent and may have been deliberately framed by police from the start. From rising star to accused villain. When people talk about tragedy in sports, they often mention the stories of young athletes who had all the promise in the world, only to see it vanish in a moment. For Kyren Lacy, a 24-year-old wide receiver out of Louisiana State University, that moment came on a December afternoon in 2024. Just days before Christmas, a chain reaction car crash on a rural highway in Lafourche Parish forever changed the trajectory of his life, his career, and ultimately his legacy.
You can see there's a pretty substantial amount of damage here where Lacy, we're told, crashed his car after having taken his own life.
But to understand why this story resonated so strongly across the nation, and why the later release of new body cam and surveillance footage in October 2025 has sparked outrage, we need to start with who Kyren was before his name was plastered across crime reports, arrest warrants, and headlines that painted him as a criminal. Kyren Pierre Lacy was born on December 27, 2000 in Thibodaux, Louisiana, a small city steeped in Cajun culture and community ties. He was raised by his parents, Kenny Lacy and Candace Washington, alongside two younger brothers, Jaden and Liam, in what has been described as a tight-knit family that valued both faith and hard work. At Thibodaux High School, Kyren quickly stood out as a gifted multi-sport athlete. Standing at 6'3" and weighing around 210 pounds, he had the build of a college-ready receiver even as a teenager. He was dominant on the football field, ranking among the top receivers in Louisiana, and also showcased his athleticism on the basketball court. By his senior year, Lacy was a 3-star recruit, eventually committing to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, ULL, a decision that kept him close to home. His highlight reels showed a wideout with sharp route running ability, great hands, and the size to be a mismatch against defenders. Kyren's college career was marked by steady growth and eventual breakout performances. At ULL, he totaled 52 receptions for 866 yards and 10 touchdowns. After transferring to LSU in 2022, he took his game to the national stage. Over 3 seasons, he recorded 102 receptions for 1,692 yards and 16 touchdowns. In 2024, he had his strongest year yet, with 58 catches for 866 yards and 9 touchdowns, earning second-team All-SEC honors. NFL scouts saw him as a mid-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, describing him as a plug-and-play receiver who could contribute immediately at the professional level. Some even called him a potential draft steal due to his SEC experience and athletic upside. This was the future Kyren envisioned for himself, but it all came crashing down, literally, on December 17, 2024. The crash that would forever alter Kyren's life happened on Louisiana Highway 20 near Thibodaux in Lafourche Parish. This stretch of road is rural, narrow, and notorious for its no passing zones marked by double yellow lines. Here's what the Louisiana State Police, LSP, initially reported. Kyren, driving a green 2023 Dodge Charger, allegedly passed multiple vehicles at high speed in a no-passing zone. This maneuver supposedly forced a northbound pickup truck to swerve suddenly to avoid a collision. Behind that pickup, a white SUV swerved left into the opposite lane and struck a Kia Sorento head-on. 78-year-old Herman Hall, a retired U.S. Marine and respected member of the Thibodaux community, was in the Sorento and died from his injuries. According to police, Kyren did not stop to render aid or call for help. They accused him of fleeing the scene, an act that not only inflamed public anger but also painted him as a man trying to escape responsibility. The official crash reconstruction from LSP concluded that Kyren's reckless passing directly caused the chain reaction crash. Their narrative was clear. Without his dangerous maneuver, there would have been no collision, and Herman Hall would still be alive. The story immediately went public, with outlets like CBS Sports and ESPN reporting on it. The image of a reckless football star driving fast in his Dodge Charger and leaving an elderly veteran to die was shocking, and it spread quickly. By January 2025, LSP had secured an arrest warrant. Kyren turned himself in voluntarily and faced multiple charges: negligent homicide for allegedly causing Hall's death, felony hit and run for leaving the crash scene without offering help, reckless operation of a vehicle for unsafe driving practices. Bail was set at $151,000. He posted bond and was released, but the damage to his reputation had already been done. Headlines labeled him a reckless driver and NFL prospect facing homicide charges. His NFL draft stock plummeted. He was no longer seen as a promising mid-round pick, but as a liability. Even more devastating was the public perception. Social media was flooded with takes about athletes behaving irresponsibly, with some even comparing Kyren to other infamous cases like Henry Ruggs. It was as if the presumption of innocence had been stripped away entirely. Media coverage also highlighted the tragic loss of Herman Hall, the 78-year-old victim. Hall was remembered as a Marine veteran, a devoted family man, and a respected community figure in Thibodaux. Local outlets like WAFB and Fox 8 Live painted a picture of a man whose life had been cut short by the recklessness of a young athlete. These narratives amplified the anger and solidified Kyren as the villain in the public's eyes. By mid-January, the story had escalated from a local Louisiana tragedy to a national talking point. Sports networks, newspapers, and online outlets amplified the Louisiana State Police's narrative almost word for word. Articles like ABC News coverage leaned heavily on police reports, portraying Kyren as a dangerous driver who had ended a man's life. Few questioned whether the reconstruction was accurate. Social media commentary, too, was unforgiving. While some fans voiced support for Kyren and reminded others of innocent until proven guilty, the overwhelming tide treated him as guilty before his day in court. This overwhelming perception created a kind of public trial, where the verdict had already been reached long before the grand jury hearing was even scheduled. By the spring of 2025, Kyren Lacy was no longer viewed as a promising NFL receiver. He was, in the eyes of much of the public, a criminal who had recklessly taken a man's life. But what if the narrative wasn't true? What if the very foundation of the police report, that Kyren was the cause of the crash, was false? And what if there was evidence, not just speculation, but video proof, that Kyren had been wrongly accused, wrongly framed, and left to carry the unbearable weight of charges that should never have been filed? That's where we turn next, because in October 2025, months after Kyren's tragic death, his attorney would release surveillance and body cam footage that changed everything we thought we knew about this case. The new evidence that changes everything. When Kyren Lacy's name was first tied to the crash on Highway 20, the story seemed simple. A reckless athlete showing off in his Dodge Charger caused a chain reaction accident that killed a respected community member and then fled the scene. It was a tragic story, but also an easy one to tell. But in October 2025, 10 months after the crash and 6 months after Kyren's death, that narrative began to unravel. His attorney, Matt Ory, appeared on local Huma station HTV10, bringing forward surveillance footage, body cam recordings, and an official district attorney's report that painted a very different picture. This was not just new evidence. It was evidence that suggested Kyren Lacy had been innocent all along, and that the original police investigation may have misled the public, misrepresented the facts, and possibly even coerced witnesses to construct a case against him. The surveillance video was the first bombshell. For months, the Louisiana State Police insisted Kyren's reckless passing caused the crash, that his actions forced the white SUV to swerve into Herman Hall's vehicle. But according to the footage revealed by Ory, that wasn't true. The video showed that at the exact moment of impact, Kyren's green Dodge Charger was 72.6 to 92.3 yards behind the vehicles involved in the collision. In other words, he was too far away to have caused the SUV to swerve.
At the time of impact, he's 72.6 yards behind the vehicles at the time of impact.
Ory explained during the interview that yes, Kyren had passed 4 vehicles earlier up the road, but he had returned to his lane long before the fatal crash happened.
Kyren Lacy did in fact pass 4 cars. There's no disputing that. Further north, Kyren Lacy passed 4 cars. However, he was back in his lane of travel, 92.3 yards, back in his lane, behind Mr. Hall.
This surveillance evidence alone began to unravel the case against him. If his car wasn't even near the accident site when the chain reaction started, how could he have been the cause? The second piece of evidence came from the Lafourche Parish District Attorney's Office. Their independent report flatly contradicted the Louisiana State Police's version of events. The DA's conclusion stated, "No evidence submitted in the crash report supports that Kyren Lacy should have known that his actions were the cause of the crash." Think about that. The DA, the same office responsible for deciding whether to indict Kyren, determined there was no causation between his driving and the fatal collision. Yet Kyren was still facing charges of negligent homicide, felony hit and run, and reckless operation. This contradiction is critical. The LSP's investigation framed Kyren as the reckless initiator of the crash, but the DA's review said otherwise. If the surveillance video and DA's report poked holes in the case, the body cam footage blew it wide open. Ori presented video from Louisiana State Police Trooper Tyler Werner's body camera that captured an interaction with one of the crash witnesses, the driver of a gold pickup truck. Initially, the witness told Werner that it was the gold truck ahead of him that forced the white SUV to swerve, not Kyren's Charger. But the body cam showed Werner seemingly coaching the witness to change his account.
You were running in the back of me?
So, but the Charger was coming right at you, correct?
Right.
And that's why you had to slam on your brake, the head on with you. So yeah, just make sure you include that, and that's very important.
In another part of the recording, the witness can be heard blaming another vehicle, but Werner directs him back toward Kyren's Charger. Even more troubling, parts of the conversation were not recorded, raising suspicion that Werner turned his body cam off during a critical moment. If true, this would suggest not just sloppy policing, but potential witness coercion and evidence manipulation. The body cam and surveillance footage also revealed something else. Kyren wasn't alone in the car. A passenger in his Dodge Charger is visible in the footage, yet investigators never interviewed this person. Why would police fail to question the only other eyewitness who could confirm what Kyren did or didn't do? That omission raises serious concerns about whether the investigation was aimed at uncovering the truth or simply pinning blame. Attorney Matt Ori was clear in his assessment. Yes, Kyren drove recklessly earlier up the highway, but no, his actions did not cause Herman Hall's death. Ori's central argument was that Kyren became a scapegoat, a young, black, high-profile athlete whose name and face made the narrative more sensational for both police and media coverage. He described his mission now as one of posthumous justice, clearing Kyren's name and exposing the misconduct in the investigation. Ori told local outlets,
This is about making a promise to a kid who begged you to help him.
The release of this footage sparked a firestorm online. On X, one user wrote, "They literally framed this man. They called him a murderer when he didn't kill anybody." Another posted, "I need that police officer thrown in prison. This has to stop. He is on Bodycam lying." Fans also shared heartbreaking details, like a clip of Kyren saying he planned to post a video once he was found innocent in court. Kyren Lacy planned on posting this after he was found innocent in court. RIP K2. Sports figures joined the outrage too. On their Nightcap podcast, Shannon Sharp and Chad Ocho Cinco Johnson blasted the police investigation.
Obviously, everybody needs to be held accountable.
Yes.
Everybody that is a part of that police department needs to be held accountable. The witness who was not bribed but was tempted to tell a story that wasn't true needs jail time.
For sure.
The officer who created the story to say that it was Kyren Lacy's fault, he needs to be jail time. To Lacy's family, I hope they sue not only the city, but that police department and get everything they deserve.
Their voices amplified what many online were already saying, that Kyren Lacy had been set up, wrongly accused, and publicly condemned for something he did not do. The Louisiana State Police, for their part, have stood by their original investigation. In a statement, they reiterated that crash reconstruction experts found Kyren's reckless driving initiated the chain of events. They noted that a judge found the evidence sufficient to issue a warrant, but critically, they have not addressed the allegations of witness coaching or body cam tampering. That silence has only fueled public anger. The significance of the October 2025 revelations cannot be overstated. For nearly a year, Kyren Lacy was publicly branded as the reckless driver who killed a Marine veteran. He carried that weight until his death in April 2025. Now, the surveillance video, body cam footage, and DA's report point to a different truth. He was behind the accident, not ahead of it. He could not have caused the swerve that led to Herman Hall's death. A trooper may have pressured a witness to rewrite the narrative. The DA's office itself concluded there was no evidence of causation. If this information had been made public earlier, Kyren Lacy might still be alive today. By the time the new evidence emerged, it was too late for Kyren. He had already taken his own life in April 2025, one day before his scheduled grand jury hearing. But understanding how the charges, the media pressure, and the weight of public judgment built up to that tragic moment is essential. Because while the evidence shows Kyren may have been innocent, the system's delay in uncovering and acknowledging that truth directly contributed to his demise. In the next section, we'll trace the timeline from his arrest to his tragic death in Houston and see how the crushing weight of false accusations left him with nowhere to turn. The weight of false accusations. If the new evidence revealed in October 2025 has shown us anything, it's that the story told about Kyren Lacy in the months before his death was incomplete and in key ways, deeply misleading. But to understand the toll this false narrative took, we need to step back to the months immediately following the December 17th, 2024 crash. On January 10th, 2025, after nearly a month of investigation, the Louisiana State Police, LSP, obtained an arrest warrant for Kyren. The warrant was issued by the 17th Judicial District Court in Lafourche Parish, citing the findings of the crash reconstruction and witness testimony. 2 days later, on January 12th, 2025, Kyren turned himself in. He was booked into the Lafourche Parish Correctional Complex and faced 3 serious charges: negligent homicide, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison, felony hit and run, resulting in death, punishable by up to 10 years in prison, reckless operation of a vehicle, a misdemeanor. Bail was set at $151,000, $100,000 for negligent homicide, $50,000 for hit and run, and $1,000 for reckless driving. Kyren posted bond and was released, but the damage was already done. His mugshot, arrest details, and association with a fatal crash were splashed across the news cycle. Within hours of the arrest, sports outlets like ESPN and national news platforms such as ABC News framed the story around Kyren's fall from grace, a promising NFL prospect now facing homicide charges. The narrative was devastating. A young athlete, reckless with his choices, was responsible for killing a 78-year-old Marine veteran. Few outlets questioned the police report. Few asked whether the crash reconstruction might have been flawed. Instead, headlines tied Kyren's name permanently to words like reckless, negligent, and hit and run. And while journalists might later argue that they were only reporting what police said, the impact on Kyren was undeniable. On social media, the presumption of innocence evaporated. Users compared Kyren to Henry Ruggs, the former NFL player convicted in a fatal DUI crash. Others mocked him as another athlete who thought he was above the law. Draft boards on Reddit and X lit up with speculation that no team would ever touch him. The court of public opinion had already reached its verdict, and that verdict weighed heavily on Kyren. Not only was he facing serious charges, but his lifelong dream of playing in the NFL, a dream he had worked towards since high school, was slipping away in real time. The next step in the legal process was a grand jury hearing, scheduled for April 13th, 2025. This would have been the moment when prosecutors presented evidence and jurors decided whether to indict Kyren on the homicide and hit and run charges. Kyren's legal team believed they had a strong case. Attorney Matt Orey was confident that video and data analysis showed Kyren was far behind the crash at the time of impact. Orey even presented some of this evidence at early hearings, but in the public eye, none of that mattered. The headlines had already shaped the narrative, and Kyren carried that burden with him into every practice, every family gathering, every sleepless night. By early April 2025, those close to Kyren described him as overwhelmed. He was battling the crushing reality of facing prison time, losing his NFL prospects, and being vilified in the press. His agent later released a statement, shared widely online, saying that had the grand jury reviewed the evidence, there was a high probability that the negligent homicide charge would have been declined. But Kyren didn't live to see that day. On April 12, 2025, one day before his scheduled grand jury hearing, Kyren's life ended in Houston, Texas. According to police reports and media summaries, the chain of events unfolded as follows. 1. Domestic incident. Kyren was involved in an altercation at a family member's home. He reportedly discharged a firearm into the ground during the dispute. 2. Police chase. A weapons disturbance call was made and Houston police responded. When officers arrived, Kyren fled in his Dodge Charger. 3. The pursuit. After a short chase covering just a few miles, Kyren crashed his vehicle. 4. Suicide. Officers found him with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Bodycam and dashcam confirmed that it was suicide. Kyren was pronounced dead at the scene. He was just 24 years old. The news broke the next day, and the reaction was a mixture of shock, grief, and anger. Fans mourned a young man whose potential was stolen, not only by tragedy, but by a narrative that had left him feeling hopeless. On X, users expressed outrage that he had been treated as guilty before ever stepping foot in a courtroom. His family released statements of grief, and his attorney vowed to continue fighting to clear his name posthumously. Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco Johnson, speaking on their Nightcap show months later, reflected on how the false narrative pushed Kyren to the edge.
You know they believe. Everybody says I didn't do it. In actuality, he didn't.
For many, Kyren's suicide wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was the direct result of a flawed investigation and the crushing weight of public vilification. Adding to Kyren's stress was the wrongful death lawsuit filed by Herman Hall's family against his estate. Even as he prepared for his criminal case, Kyren faced civil litigation that threatened his family's financial future. Combined with the media narrative and his declining draft stock, it was a storm of pressures few could endure. On April 13, 2025, the grand jury hearing that Kyren had been dreading never happened. Instead, he was mourned as another young athlete gone too soon. Some wondered, what if he had made it one more day? Would the grand jury have declined the negligent homicide charge, as Ori predicted? Would that have lifted the weight enough to keep him alive? Those are questions that can never be answered. But what the October evidence has made clear is that Kyren should never have been carrying that weight in the first place. Kyren's story illustrates a broader problem. The rush to judgment that happens when police reports are taken at face value, amplified by media outlets hungry for clicks, and accepted by the public without question. The Louisiana State Police said he was guilty. The media repeated it, and Kyren lived and died under that shadow. Only months after his death did the body cam footage, surveillance video, and DA's report reveal the truth, that the case against him was built on shaky ground, possibly even manipulation. By the time the truth emerged, it was too late for Kyren Lacy. But it wasn't too late for the conversation his story has sparked, about accountability, about justice, and about how quickly a life can be destroyed when the system gets it wrong. When Kyren Lacy's attorney Matt Ori released the new evidence in October 2025, the story shifted from tragedy to outrage. It was no longer just about a young athlete whose life was cut short. It was about a system that appeared to have failed him. Law enforcement, the justice process, and the media. Fans and athletes alike argued that if the DA's office already had evidence showing Kyren wasn't at fault, that information should have been made public before his name and reputation were destroyed. The sense of injustice was made even sharper by the fact that Kyren himself had expressed hope that the truth would clear him. But that day never came. The anger wasn't limited to fans. Prominent athletes and commentators weighed in. Their reaction crystallized what many were feeling, that this was not just a tragic accident, but a deliberate miscarriage of justice. Alongside the outrage at law enforcement, many began pointing fingers at the media. Sports and news outlets had uncritically repeated the LSP's narrative, branding Kyren as reckless, negligent, and criminal before any grand jury or trial. Few questioned whether the evidence actually supported that claim. Few asked whether the police might have gotten it wrong. For months, Kyren lived under that shadow, mocked, vilified, and doubted. His NFL dream was destroyed not by a verdict, but by the assumption of guilt. The October revelations forced some outlets to issue updates, but for many fans, it was too little, too late. With the new evidence on the table, legal experts have suggested that Kyren's family may have grounds for civil action. A wrongful death lawsuit could target the state police if it's proven that witness tampering or investigative misconduct contributed to his suicide. A defamation case could also be considered against outlets that painted him as guilty based on unverified claims. If lawsuits are filed, they could bring new scrutiny not just to Louisiana State Police, but to how high-profile athletes are treated in criminal cases. Kyren's case raises profound questions about justice in America. 1. Law enforcement accountability. How can a body cam show what appears to be witness coaching with no immediate consequences? Why wasn't the passenger in Kyren's car interviewed? 2. Presumption of innocence. Why do police reports, which are preliminary by nature, often get reported by the media as definitive facts? 3. Athlete mental health. How do false accusations, media vilification, and social media pressure compound to push young athletes toward despair? These aren't just questions about one man's story. They're questions about the systems we all rely on. For Kyren's family, friends, and fans, the October revelations are bittersweet. They prove what many believed from the start, that he wasn't the reckless villain painted in headlines. But they also confirmed that his death was preventable. If the surveillance footage, DA's report, and body cam evidence had been made public earlier, Kyren might never have faced charges. His NFL career might still be intact. He might still be alive. Now, his legacy is being reshaped. From accused killer to wrongly framed athlete, his story is becoming a rallying cry for reform. On X, one fan summarized it simply, "Rest in peace, Kyren, you deserve better." Kyren Lacy's story is not just about football or even about one tragic crash on a Louisiana highway. It's about what happens when a system fails, when the truth is buried under convenience, when a young man is condemned before he's heard, and when the cost of that failure is a life lost too soon. As the outrage continues, as lawsuits loom, and as his family pushes for justice, one truth stands out. Kyren Lacy was innocent, and the world learned it far too late. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other awesome videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.